Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Captain Paul Ryder.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Captain Paul Ryder. I'm chair of the FIFA Departure Committee for ALPA and the association's resource coordinator. I'm also an Embraer 145 captain for ExpressJet Airlines. I'm honored and pleased to serve as today's MC. Thank you for taking time to be here at this conference that we've titled Airline Pilot Shortage, Myths, Facts, Solutions. We're webcasting this event today, so that we want to welcome all of our viewers on the webcast joining us. Thank you. As you have seen from the agenda, we have an excellent program in store for you today. I would like to thank our sponsors, Jet Pubs and Pan Am International Flight Academy, for their contributions to the success of this event. We want this conference to be interactive, and we invite your participation, and not only for our audience, but for those watching on our web stream. I'll have more details on that shortly. It's no secret that there's been vigorous debate over the last couple of years about whether a pilot shortage exists now or whether one could materialize in the future. For ALPA members, the airlines, and others with skin in the game, it's a serious issue that deserves serious answers. A genuine pilot shortage would mean a shrinking airline industry. This would not only affect the airline industry, but many other industries that rely on air travel to contribute to the national economy. As you learned today, steps are being taken to address this issue and the potential for a shortage of pilots, and ALPA is very engaged in that effort. You should have a copy of the agenda at your conference table with materials about today's events. I'd like to take just a few minutes to outline how we'll spend the day together. First, we'll hear from ALPA's president, Captain Tim Canoll, who will add his welcoming remarks and outline the association's perspective on a pilot shortage. Following his remarks, we'll hear from Captain Carl Davis of Boeing, who will provide us with an overview of the pilot needs into the future. At the conclusion of these proceedings and before our first panel on pathways from high school to cockpit, I'm going to give a high-level overview of the three primary means for a pilot to be a candidate for an airline pilot first officer position. Most of us in this room have a high level of experience within the airline industry, but for those that don't, I'd like to benefit them by providing this overview. I'll work to establish a common baseline of understanding for all. The remainder of our conference will explore three different aspects of airline pilot supply issues. Our first panel will discuss the primary pathways from high school to the cockpit. They'll lay out three basic paths that all pilots use to go from 0 hours to ATP or restricted ATP. We'll have a networking break, then reconvene for the second panel, which will discuss how to attract the next generation of students to become airline pilots. After that panel, we'll have lunch and eat together here in this room. During lunch, we'll hear from our keynote address on the subject of pilot supply from a global perspective. The third panel, which I'll moderate, will focus on the motivating factors for students seeking a career in aviation and the return on investment for their efforts. We'll explore the incentives necessary to attract qualified candidates. After a final networking break, we'll introduce to you several airline pilots who will give us some insights into the various career paths they took. Each of them was successful in overcoming obstacles. They applied themselves to get the education and training needed to become an airline pilot. Now they're living their dream. And finally, I'll have some closing remarks to recap the event and what we've heard from all of our speakers. We want to make this a truly interactive conference. To that end, we'll welcome and encourage audience participation. We'll set aside time at the end of each panel for questions. Please use the microphones located on the floor. If you're watching the webcast, we would prefer to participate via text, or if you're here and would prefer to participate via text, the number is 703-594-6660. That number is printed out for you and placed at your seat for easy reference. You'll notice that there's also a conference evaluation form. Please fill this out during the day and place it in the box at the back of the room, or you can leave it at the table and we'll pick it up at the end of the day. Your feedback is very important to us so we can make this event and future events better. To save time, we're not going to read the bios of our speakers. They are provided for you in your conference materials. So let's get started. Captain Tim Canoll, ALPA's 10th president, was elected to his position in October 2014. He began his 4-year term of office January 1st of this year. Please join me in welcoming Captain Canoll.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Paul, for that introduction. And for all your hard work in coordinating this event. And also, I'd like to thank United pilot Mark Haley, the chairman of ALPA's Education Committee, and his vice chairman, PSA pilot Justin Dehan, for their contributions to this event. Thank you very much to all three of you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I also want to express my sincere appreciation to Cassandra Bosco. Cassandra, there you are, right there. I want to say thank you. And she's the interim director of the University Aviation Association, who helped create today's agenda and the speaker lineup. So thank you, Cassandra, very much for all your help in putting this together. Cassandra and the UAA are tremendous resources, and we appreciate what they do to educate the next generation of professional aviators. So we're here today to discuss and collaborate on the need to ensure that a genuine airline pilot shortage does not occur in North America. Please play the video.
The pilot shortage, myths, facts, and solutions. Is there a pilot shortage? ALPA's view has been clear from the start. Right now, the airlines that are struggling to find pilots don't offer competitive wages, benefits, working conditions, and a career path. The Airline Pilots Association is concerned about the long-term supply of pilots if this situation continues. Whatever your views, everyone should agree on this. It's in all our best interest to ensure a sustained supply of highly skilled, highly trained, outstanding aviators. What's our current situation? 21,000 pilots are expected to retire from mainline carriers in the next 10 years. The industry forecast is that more than 500,000 new airline pilots are needed to fly the world fleet over the next 20 years. Mainline airlines have thousands of applicant resumes and are not having a problem hiring pilots. But some regionals are. What must change? Advancing the piloting profession is the solution to the pilot supply problem. For the U.S. airline industry to thrive and succeed, we need to attract and maintain the pilots, retain today's airline pilots, and attract the pilots of tomorrow. Solutions must be adopted and implemented across the industry that include wages and benefits, reasonable work rules, a contractually guaranteed career path. Some airlines have taken initial steps to address some of these issues and are having more success attracting and retaining pilots. However, these changes are not enough. More must be done, and all changes need to be permanent. We need to do more to make the pilot profession attractive to the current next generation of prospective aviators. Like any other profession, prospective pilots will want clarity and satisfactory answers to several key questions, such as, what will I earn initially as I move along in my career? Will I have a good work-life balance? Will I have a stable, long-term career? What do I have to do to become an airline pilot, and what will it cost? Whatever your current view on the pilot shortage, we should all be able to agree that more must be done, and it needs to start now. ALPA will continue to work with our government and industry partners to make the airline profession one that is attractive today and for years to come. To learn more, visit alpa.org/pilot pay shortage.
Okay, so that's why we're here. That illustrates why we're here. ALPA's leading the charge. We're trying to find common ground that we can all agree on. We're reaching for solutions needed to address the challenges the aviation industry faces in an increasingly global marketplace. So we want a clear path to our cockpits of our airliners for our future generations. Our current pilots want a clear career path after entering the airline piloting profession. And we all want a U.S. aviation industry that remains a viable player into the future. So why are some airlines having trouble filling their flight decks? We all know that, indeed, some airlines are experiencing difficulties in hiring and retaining qualified pilots. And ALPA's been very vocal about why this happens. It comes down to a simple lesson in economics. When airlines continue to offer an average starting salary of $23,000 a year, the market is going to respond. And this segment of the industry isn't just for recent college graduates. In fact, the average age of a first officer in the quote-unquote regional industry is 35 years old, 35. And many of these pilots have amassed $150,000 to $200,000 in student loans, and they need to pay those loans off. ALPA spoke up primarily to respond to the claims within the airline industry that the FAA's new pilot training and qualification requirements fabricated a pilot shortage. When some began urging Congress to roll back these new safety-based pilot qualifications and training rules that we and the airlines helped the FAA develop to address problems highlighted by several fatal accidents, we certainly could not remain silent. Some also claim that the pilot shortage forced airlines to reduce flights. And again, here we're just back to economics. Turns out it's a convenient excuse for what is really an economic decision that all our airlines must make on a daily basis. We know, for instance, that major airlines have focused on capacity discipline instead of expansion in an attempt to maximize profits. Well, this combined with changing regional jet economics, largely due to fuel and maintenance costs, have contributed to some airlines pulling out of the smaller markets. And it's the real reason why some cities have seen reduced service. We also know that North America is very fortunate to have thousands of locations where a person can learn to fly. In fact, the U.S. offers some of the best aviation training in the world, in the military, in universities, flight schools, you name it. As a result of our training resources, which other countries around the world envy, we can train a lot of pilots in a very short period of time. And the U.S. has more pilots than any other country in the world. So it's no surprise that the number of pilots who could work in this industry significantly exceeds the number of job openings available here in the States. These and other facts tell us that there really isn't a pilot shortage right now. But with upcoming retirements and increasing airline fleets, it's certainly an area of potential concern. And it's clear that there is a pilot pay shortage. Some pilots are simply not willing to accept the compensation packages offered by some airlines, especially when there's not a clear career path for them to follow at that carrier. And honestly, I really don't blame them for those decisions. But whatever your position, and I acknowledge that there's differing views on this, but whatever your position, we can all agree that there should not come a time when the U.S. truly faces a shortage of qualified pilots. This conference is about collaboration and moving forward together, not winning the arguments. At the end of the day, true change comes from consensus to work towards a common goal. Here are just a few things, as referenced in the video, that I think everyone in the room can agree upon. We all want highly trained, highly skilled, professional pilots in our cockpits. 2, we all want a sustained and adequate supply of these professional pilots. 3, we all want generations of pilots to want to enter our industry, the next generation to want to enter our industry. 4, we all want to see the airline industry grow and thrive. And that happens when airlines have enough qualified flight crew members to operate all of their flights. And finally, we all want to find solutions to whatever problems we face that work for all the parties involved, everybody here. Today, ALPA brought together all the industry stakeholders needed to address these challenges. We're very pleased to have a top-notch group of subject matter experts in the room who will share their views on how to achieve our mutual goals. These people are highly experienced airline pilots, aviation educators, airline managers, and experts from other aviation organizations. And we're here in this room all together to address the issues that have, up to this point, been discussed in various industry circles, but with a fragmented approach. So I want to personally thank you, all of you, for being here today. It illustrates our commitment to a common goal of molding the U.S. aviation industry and meeting our future needs. The Airline Pilots Association, like so many other aviation industry stakeholders, has a vested interest in growing competitive airlines that can attract the best and the brightest right here at home. We want to work together to keep America's airline pilots in the U.S. aviation industry, the largest, safest, most secure transportation system the world has ever known. And I'd argue it's simply the best. That's our common goal, and we're all in. ALPA's all in. And since we agree on all that, and I know everyone agrees with everything I say, that's just what I've been told, and I know that we're all very competitive by nature. This is an industry that's uber competitive. We collectively should do everything within our power to remain the best in the world. And it's a ranking that we simply cannot afford to lose. Thank you for your attention this morning. I'd be happy at this time to take any questions anyone has for me.
Captain Canoll, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it.
It now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Captain Carl Davis. He is the Boeing Company's chief pilot.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'd like to say thank you to Captain Canoll, ALPA, and the UAA for inviting Boeing to be here today to be a part of this conversation. Certainly a very important conversation for all of us in this industry. I don't have a lot of slides today, but I think the slides that I did bring tell a pretty good story from the global perspective of the impactors and the factors that are going to apply pressure to the situation we're seeing here in the United States and North America overall. So we'll start by taking a look at our market outlook. I'll take just a moment to look at that wonderful piece of machinery that's probably my favorite airplane there across the top of the screen. But draw your attention down to the left-hand side of the chart. The numbers are fairly impressive, as we talked about. The number of airplanes over the next 20 years that we predict are going to go into the market and forecast are going to go into the market. 37,000 airplanes, give or take. North America, number stands out, 7,500 airplanes. I understand that number's probably been refined. It's now closer to 7,800 airplanes. Looking at that, 60% of those are fleet renewal type airplanes going in, looking for better economies, et cetera. But that still leaves somewhere in the vicinity of 2,000 airframes that we see going into the market in the next 20 years that are growth. And depending on how you want to crew those airplanes, with somewhere between 5 and 10 crews to the aircraft, depending on your model, that's a lot of pilots in North America over and above what we think we're going to need to replace just the fleets. The number that really jumps out, of course, is Asia Pacific. Actually, let me step back real quick and talk about a number I still kind of find interesting here that really drives to the rest of this, the pressures on the industry. In 1994, the U.S. airlines, North American airlines, were responsible for carrying 74% of paying passenger traffic worldwide. The prediction in 2034 is that U.S. airlines will be carrying 38% of the traffic. as we look at these numbers, it's easy to tell why. It's not a fact that the economics are driving people out of our airplanes. It's the fact that the rest of the world is getting access to airline travel. We look down, 13,000 airplanes going into the Asia Pacific region. Middle East, another 3,000 airplanes. There's a lot of growth happening in the rest of the world. One of the big drivers there is, and this number still staggers my mind, the prediction is over the next 20 years, on an annual basis in the Asia Pacific region, there will be access to airline travel to an extra 100 million passengers in that region each year. And I had to read that 3 or 4 times to really let that sink in. You're talking about explosive growth, and we're certainly seeing it with the orders we're receiving, and at the same time, the customers and the countries that are coming to us and saying, how are we going to find pilots to fill these airplanes? We've kind of blown up expanded the pilot part of this chart on other presentations. I think it's worth mentioning that we talk about the technician demand, and I'll just mention that real quick. So we look at 533,000 pilots needed in the next 20 years worldwide. There's a demand somewhere close to 600,000 technicians needed as well. We certainly, on our maintenance training side of the house, are looking at that. It's going to be an issue as we move forward in all these areas of the world we're talking about. Asia Pacific here, 216,000 to 220,000 pilots over the next 20 years, 10,500 pilots a year in an area of the world that does not have the infrastructure that we have in place. They are coming to us as the manufacturer again and saying, how can you help us? Last year at Oshkosh, we announced that we had the pilot development program we're starting to work on to work with these customers in these countries to look for ways for them to go through ab initio. The words MPL, or the letters MPL, are back up for discussion again quite a bit, and they're talking to us, and we're certainly trying to find ways to help them as well. North America, 88,000 pilots, 4,400 a year. That would be nice if it was going to be a flat, level line for us as we look down the road. I think the part here that can't be overlooked is the fact that there's peaks and valleys in that. And they're going to stress the system in a number of ways as we look to train, because the numbers seem to go up year after year looking downrange. I can tell you that as I've been out around the world talking to customers, working with my group, or as we have airplanes go into service, the rest of the world is figuring out they've got to come to America to look for pilots, at least somewhat, to find some talent to come in to fly these airplanes. As Captain Canoll said, we've got the best infrastructure, we've got great pilots, and they know they can count on us. As we do that, or as they do that, the interesting part has been to watch the numbers go up. I think everybody's probably seen, if you're looking online at all, that the latest number I saw was 320,000 a year for A320 captains in China. That's going to be a draw. Whether we lose a lot of pilots or a few pilots, we're still going to lose pilots to people who are able to get out, live in other countries, and go make that kind of money for a while. Will the rest of the world's market continue to bear up to those kind of financial pressures? I don't know. But right now, it's one of the things we're facing. Anecdotally, it's been a couple of years since I've seen the airlines ad, but I know there was an airline in China that had realized in order to get expats, they were going to have to figure out how to keep them, and they actually had a matchmaking service was one of their recruitment functions. So they're going to be thinking outside the box. They're going to continue to do that, and we're going to have to be prepared for those kind of pressures on our system and what our young people and the new people we're getting interested in aviation may face as they go out into the world. It's an industry-wide issue, and we're certainly glad to be involved in looking for the answers and want to be involved with it. I think it's going to take all of us working together. This is a great gathering to have the conversation, and we are very, very pleased to be here today, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Davis.
As I mentioned earlier, I would like to provide an overview of the qualifications that an individual must have to compete for an airline pilot position. For those aspiring to be an airline pilot, the options for training are good. Students can pursue required certificates through several main pathways. The first option is through non-collegiate flight training. Though it can be done in conjunction with an aviation or non-aviation degree, this would be a path to an unrestricted ATP. The second is an accredited collegiate aviation program, either through a 2-year program, which requires 1,250 hours, or a 4-year program, which requires 1,000 hours. This would be a path to the restricted ATP. The third path is military flight training, which would require 750 hours and the conversion of military to civilian ratings. This would also be a path to the restricted ATP. Let's look at each of these a little closer. First, we'll look at the military option of gaining experience to become an airline first officer. There are 4 general ways to become a military pilot. Each branch of service may have slight differences, but generally speaking, a student can attend officer training after earning a college degree, either through OCS or OCC. They can attend an academy or service academy for each individual branch. They can join the Reserve Officer Training Corps, commonly referred to as ROTC, while in college, or they can enlist, then work to be selected for an officer program. All of these paths require that a potential pilot be selected as an officer candidate and then also be selected as a military aviator candidate. To become a military pilot, a bachelor's degree in any field is required. There is an exception with the Army's Warrant Officer Flight Training Program, or WAFT. After successfully completing flight training, a military pilot can be issued an FAA commercial certificate and instrument rating after passing an FAA competency exam. A pilot who completes military training will be eligible for the restricted ATP after accumulating 750 hours of total flight time and completing an ATP CTP program. One consideration is that a military track will typically require a candidate to commit to 10 years of service for fixed-wing flight training. Next, let's take a look at non-collegiate students and their pathway to the flight deck. These students will have to go through the process of earning their private pilot certificate, commercial pilot certificate, instrument rating, multi-engine rating, and finally, their multi-engine ATP. To take the ATP knowledge exam and practical exam, students will also need to complete an ATP CTP program. This training can be received from a local FBO, flight school, individual instructors, or a large flight academy. This training can be done under Part 61 of the Federal Aviation Regulations or within a more structured Part 141 regulation. After obtaining the commercial certificate, pilots can build their experience by flight instructing, flying corporate aircraft, or through other commercial activity. The ATP certificate has both quantity and quality flight time requirements. The quantity is 1,500 hours of total flight time. The quality of that time includes 500 hours of cross-country experience, 100 hours of night flight, 75 hours of instrument flight time, and 250 hours of PIC time. Everyone needs to graduate from an ATP certificate training program to qualify to take the ATP knowledge and practical exam. Currently, 8 training providers have applied for and been approved for the ATP CTP training program. 3 require you to be directly associated with their organization, for example, a student of that university or a candidate for that airline. For some, the non-collegiate method may be cost-effective, and for others who do not stay on a consistent path, it may run the risk of extended training timelines and higher costs. Finally, let's look at the approved collegiate flight training programs to obtain an ATP with restricted privileges. Students here must earn an aviation-related major. An aviation-related associate degree will require 1,250 hours of total time, with the exception that only 200 hours of cross-country time is required, instead of the 500 hours, the 500 hours up for the unrestricted ATP. All other requirements are the same, meaning, as previously mentioned, 100 hours of night time, 75 hours of instrument, and 250 hours of PIC. An aviation-related bachelor's degree must contain 60 credit hours, which is about 900 contact hours of academic education. Both classroom and distance learning will require only 1,000 hours of total flight time to have the restricted ATP. The 1,500-hour rule is a misnomer. Students who are interested and committed to an aviation career as an airline pilot can utilize the FOQ as a means to gain quality academic and flight instruction with credit for a reduction in the number of hours from 1,500 by a third. This means within a year of graduating, it's possible to meet the requirements to start a career-long journey as an airline pilot. Our challenge today is to identify the facts, dispel the myths, and craft solutions in a collaborative way that benefits all stakeholders. This image is the image of a flight deck of a Boeing 757. And this next one is of an Embraer 175. We must ask ourselves why some airlines are finding it hard to recruit and retain pilots in one, but not the other. Thank you.